When we use a trauma-informed approach, we assume that most people have experienced some kind of trauma in their lives. When we use this assumption, we then can create a safe and caring learning environment in classrooms. We then can create a safe school culture and then also build relationships with students that are built on compassion and trust. This approach is more holistic for the learner, as the teacher is mindful of the student as a whole person and not just focused on academic outcomes. When it comes to teaching social sciences, it's more important to use the trauma informed approach because you're covering material that could be triggering for students. What does triggering mean? Triggering means it could create strong and negative emotions or reactions to the subject. Historical events that were traumatic can be especially emotionally evocative, and it's important to help students, especially younger ones who are not as good at self-regulation, to help them process what happened in these events as well as process their feelings and their reaction to the events. And we need to do this in a way that's full of compassion rather than judgment. This is especially true for students who belong to minority or oppressed groups, as they may be more vulnerable to being triggered to these events or topics. When it comes to elementary social studies, traumatic events that have been experienced by Indigenous groups in the land now known as Canada are covered, such as colonization and the loss of territories. This is almost always shown through the perspective of Eurocentric lens. There is a saying I think that's rather pertinent: nothing about us without us. Teachers can choose to include videos, books, music, and artwork created by Indigenous people, and this allows our voices to be heard as we choose to share the information. Be aware of your own prejudices and the need for unlearning. If you've only gone to school in Western institutions, you've only learned one way of knowing the world. We Indigenous people have our own ways of seeing things and our own histories and traditions and how we share these stories and this knowledge. The process of unlearning and confronting personal biases can be uncomfortable, but this is when true growth happens. Push through it, and you're going to see the fruits of this hard work. My second tip would be to not rely on Indigenous peoples to teach you about historical events or about what happened. We have to teach our own people and go through this process of decolonizing ourselves as well. And it's a huge burden to place on us to have to not only go through this with our own people, but to teach everyone as well. There's a personal responsibility and onus on the other side of the story to teach themselves. And there is a plethora of resources and information out there if you just know where to look. There's also a personal responsibility that comes with being people of a treaty. Being First Nations, I'm a person of a treaty, which is part of a relationship, but you are also people of the treaty. A treaty has two sides. You are the other side of this treaty, and you should learn what it means to be people of a treaty and make sure that the government is upholding its promises in the treaty. Keep parents involved and the lines of communication open. Parents are our collaborators and they're experts on their own children. And they're going to need to know what's happening so that they know how to support their children if their children come home upset. or have questions about certain things that they find confusing or traumatizing. So send letters home and send information to parents so they know how and when to support their kids should anything be experienced that could trigger strong emotions or questions.